The morning broke with a cruel kind of silence, the kind that made even the cold air feel judgmental. A man collapsed on the pavement of Raven Heights, and instead of rushing to help him, people stopped, but only to laugh. Someone pointed at his torn shoes. Another whispered that he looked like trouble. A woman stepped around him as if avoiding dirt on the ground. And just when it seemed the entire street had agreed he was worth nothing, one young woman froze mid-stride and turned back. She didn't know the world was watching. She didn't know the man at her feet once controlled empires. She didn't know rescuing him would rewrite her destiny. But the moment her trembling hands touched his shoulder, the world seemed to hold its breath. For a split second, the morning light reflected in his tired eyes, and something ancient, broken, and buried deep inside him flickered back to life. And in that quiet instant, everything shifted. Lana Rivers had woken before dawn, hoping the cold air would numb the ache in her chest. She'd spent the last of her money on fabric scraps she hoped to turn into hair bows to sell at the market. Her younger brothers were still asleep when she slipped out the door, whispering a promise she'd been making for years. "I'll make life better." Somehow, but even hope felt heavy that morning. She moved quickly through the streets, head down, thinking about bills that refused to wait, about dreams she kept postponing, about the soft voice of her mother saying she was born to sow beauty into the world. She didn't realize she had stopped walking until she heard someone laugh sharply. That old man again. Raven Heights mascot. More laughter. A phone camera pointed his way. Lana's heart twisted. The old man lay motionless, his thin frame curled against the concrete as if the cold wanted to swallow him whole. His shirt hung in tatters. Dust clung stubbornly to his skin. His breathing was shallow, too shallow. A murmur rippled through the small crowd. "I heard he used to be rich," someone said mockingly. "Look at him now. Life dealt with him." They laughed harder. Lana's eyebrows drew together, her chest tightening with something fierce and protective. Where others saw mockery, she saw danger. She stepped forward, her sandals scraping the pavement, ignoring the gasps behind her. Sir, can you hear me?" she whispered as she knelt. No response, only the faint shake of his breath. Her fingers trembled as she touched his arm. He flinched, so slightly she almost missed it. His eyes fluttered open, revealing a pair of sharp, wounded eyes that didn't match the body they lived in. Eyes that had seen power, darkness, loss. For a moment he simply stared at her, as if he couldn't believe she was real. "Please don't move," she said softly. "Let me help you sit up." The old man swallowed, the action painful, but his gaze didn't leave her face. He looked at her like someone who had survived a storm and suddenly found shelter again. Behind her, a woman scoffed. "Lana, leave him. People like that cause trouble. She always likes playing hero," another added. Lana ignored them. She slowly lifted the man into a sitting position, her arms trembling from both effort and emotion. He leaned against her, surprisingly heavy. He smelled of cold nights and forgotten battles. "I'm fine," he rasped, but his voice betrayed him. "No, you're not," Lana replied gently. "Let me get you water." When she reached into her bag, her fingers brushed the loaf of bread she had packed for her brothers. She hesitated. Feeding a stranger meant going hungry later. But her mother's voice echoed in her mind. When you don't have much, kindness becomes your wealth. Lana tore off half the loaf and pressed it into his hands. The man stared at it. His throat bobbed. Something broke in his expression, something small but heartbreaking. He took the bread slowly, reverently, as though she had given him gold. The crowd quieted, suddenly unsure how to react. Why would you help me?" he breathed. "Because you needed someone," she answered simply. And no one else stopped. He blinked hard. Fighting emotion he didn't have the strength to hide. She offered her arm again. "Come on, sir. Let me help you stand." He tried, but his legs buckled. Lana gasped and tightened her grip around him. A tall, familiar silhouette appeared through the thinning crowd. Musa, the neighborhood security officer. He scowled. "Miss Rivers, step aside. This man could be dangerous. He needs help, not suspicion." Lana shot back. Musa's gaze landed on the old man. Something in his eyes softened just a little, but his tone stayed rough. "Fine. I'll call an ambulance." "No." The old man croaked suddenly, startling them both. "No hospitals." Musa raised an eyebrow. Lana felt the man's grip tighten lightly on her sleeve, desperate, fearful. "Okay," Lana whispered, choosing to trust his fear. Then come with me to the bench over there. Rest first. Together, she and Musa helped him cross the sidewalk to a wooden bench. Lana wiped dust from his arms, brushed debris from his shirt, and tore another small piece of bread for him. People watched, confused. Why was this girl treating a beggar like a king? Why did he look at her as though she had lifted him from death? Why did he protect his identity so fiercely? The old man studied her face quietly. There was something haunted in him, yet something calculating too, as if every gesture she made was being measured, weighed, remembered. Thank you, he whispered finally. Lana nodded shyly, unaware she had just stepped into a story that would turn her world upside down. When he finally rose, limping away without giving his name, she watched him go, never imagining that the man she saved wasn't a beggar at all, but Alexander Knight, a billionaire mafia boss who once ruled the underworld with iron and mercy. And she didn't know that saving him had just altered the path of her entire future. Alexander Knight walked slowly away from the bench, each step deliberate, as though he were relearning how to exist in a world that no longer feared him. The wind swept dust across the pavement, but his mind was somewhere else. Back in a place where men bowed when he entered a room, where decisions he made in seconds determined the fates of cities, where love had once made him human, and betrayal had shattered everything. He paused at the curb, turned slightly, and looked back. Lana Rivers was still watching him, arms folded against the cold, worry etched into her thin face. She didn't know he had the kind of past that could burn nations. She didn't know he had walked away from billions to protect a woman whose memory still bled inside him. She didn't know that in a single morning, he had tasted what it felt like to be treated like a person, not a monster, not a myth, not a fallen king. Just a man. And something inside him, something that had died the day he disappeared from the underworld, shifted. He whispered to himself, kindness still exists. It felt strange in his mouth, like a forgotten language. He disappeared into an alley, the city swallowing him. But the light in Lana's eyes stayed with him long after. Driftwood Bay smelled of salt water, smoke from fishing boats, and stubborn hope. Lana walked through the narrow paths lined with patched roofs and rusting gates, balancing a bag of vegetables for her brothers, trying to ignore the heaviness of the morning. She replayed the moment the old man held her bread like it was treasure. Who was he? Where did he sleep? Would he survive another cold night? But Lana had little room in her life for unanswered questions. Rent was due. Her brothers needed school fees. Her sewing machine had finally died last week with a sputter of sparks. The world demanded survival, not curiosity. Still, she whispered a prayer for the stranger. She reached her home, a wooden door with a crooked hinge, and pushed it open. Lana, you're back. Her youngest brother, Nico, ran to her barefoot, hugging her waist. Her older brother, Theo, peeked from behind him, voice tired. Did you sell anything today? Not yet, she said softly. But we'll try again tomorrow. She smiled, but it wavered. Her brothers didn't need to know how close she was to breaking. On the opposite end of the city, in a quiet mansion on a hill, Damian Knight stood before the tall windows overlooking Raven Heights. Sharp jawline, piercing eyes, a calmness that felt dangerous. He wasn't like his father, but he was his father's son, watchful, brilliant, and carrying scars that didn't show on skin. He turned when he heard footsteps. You're late, he said without turning. Alexander stepped into the room, leaning slightly on his cane, an object he hated but refused to discard. Damian's eyes widened when he saw the state his father was in. Dad, what happened to you? Alexander collapsed into a chair, exhausted. I fell, he lied. Damian crouched beside him, his tone sharpening. Who did this? Was it Voss? The Mancini brothers? Someone trying to drag you back. It wasn't an attack, Alexander whispered. It was life. Damian froze. His father never spoke like that. Alexander closed his eyes and exhaled shakily. Son, I met someone today. Damian straightened instantly. Who? A girl. Damian blinked. A girl. Not like that, Alexander muttered. She helped me, when no one else would. Damian's gaze softened. His father had lived through betrayals that would destroy most men. Humanity wasn't something he trusted anymore. What's her name? Damian asked. She didn't tell me. But she lives in the slums. Driftwood Bay. Damian's eyebrows shot up. Driftwood Bay was a forgotten place, one most wealthy families avoided unless they wanted trouble or redemption. Alexander stared out the window. I need to see her again. Damien frowned. Father, going there isn't safe. Alexander countered quietly. Neither is walking the earth without purpose. The silence that followed was thick. Alexander continued, voice tired yet resolute. She touched something in me, Damien. Something I thought I buried the night your mother died. Damien swallowed hard. He rarely heard his father speak of his mother, the woman Alexander had given up everything to protect. Son, Alexander said softly, I need to thank that girl properly. She gave me bread with hands that were trembling, but her heart was steady. I want to understand why. Damien leaned back, watching him closely. You're planning something. Alexander nodded. A mission. A private one. But I need your help. What kind of mission? The old man's eyes darkened, haunted yet alive. The mission of seeing whether goodness still exists in this world, or if that girl was a miracle. Damien didn't fully understand, but he respected the resolve in his father's voice. Whatever you need, I'll support you. Alexander placed a hand on his shoulder. Good. Tomorrow morning, we go to Driftwood Bay. The next day, Lana stepped outside and froze, her heart leaping into her throat. A fleet of black SUVs lined the entire stretch of her slum's dusty road. Windows tinted, engines humming softly, clean enough to reflect the sea. People craned their necks. Children whispered. Mothers pulled their kids close. Driftwood Bay had seen many things, but nothing like this. Lana Rivers, a man in a dark suit, called out. Lana stiffened. Yes. He stepped aside, and Alexander Knight, cleaned, dressed, steady on his cane, appeared in front of her. Her breath caught. Sir, you're alive, he finished with a gentle smile. Thanks to you. Damien stepped beside him, hands in his pockets, eyes studying her quietly. Lana felt his gaze like warmth and caution at the same time. Alexander bowed his head slightly, humble, sincere. I came to thank you for seeing me when the world didn't. The entire neighborhood stared. Lana's heart pounded. Sir, I didn't do anything special, she whispered. You did more than you know, he replied. And I would like to know you better, if you'll allow it. Whispers erupted behind her. Lana swallowed hard. Why me? Alexander smiled faintly. Because, child, you're the only one who remembered I was human. And without knowing it, Lana had just been invited into the shadows of a dynasty she didn't yet understand, one that was about to test her heart in ways she never imagined. For the first time in years, Driftwood Bay felt breathless, not because of danger, but because of curiosity. The slum had never seen black SUVs parked so neatly along its dusty paths, and it had certainly never seen a man with a presence like Alexander Knight bow his head to anyone, least of all a seamstress who spent most days stitching torn school uniforms for a few coins. Lana's hands shook slightly as she stepped aside to let Alexander and Damien enter her home. The wooden door creaked. The small room smelled faintly of sea breeze and old fabric. Her brothers peeked nervously from behind a curtain. Sir, Lana whispered, I wish I could offer you something to drink, but... Alexander raised a hand gently. Child, you offered me something far rarer than water yesterday. You offered dignity. Lana's throat tightened. Damien observed quietly from the side, posture relaxed but eyes sharp, eyes that seemed to see everything. The missing floor tiles, the patched roof, the threadbare mat on the ground, the quiet pride in Lana's stance despite the poverty around her. Alexander took a slow breath, letting his gaze wander around the small home, absorbing every detail. I wanted to see where you come from, to understand what shaped someone who could give away her last piece of bread. Lana looked down, embarrassed. Anyone would have helped. Damien's voice cut gently through the room. No, they wouldn't. I was there later. People stepped over him, laughed, filmed him. Lana froze. Alexander smiled softly. But you stopped. Her brothers shifted behind her, uncertain. She turned to them. Theo, Nico, greet our visitors. Theo stepped forward bravely. Good morning, sir. My sister always helps people. Nico nodded eagerly. She's like Mama was. Alexander felt that line strike somewhere deep inside him. Something tightened in Damien's chest too. He remembered the stories of his mother, how her compassion had been both a blessing and a curse. Lana's quiet strength reminded him of a woman he had only known through memories and whispered stories. Alexander turned to Lana again. I came here for two reasons. First, to thank you. Second, to offer support, without obligation. Lana blinked. Support. Damien stepped forward slightly, hands in his pockets. Tell us what you dream of, Lana. She hesitated. Dreams were delicate things, easily mocked, often broken. She swallowed. I want to own a sewing shop. A small one. Somewhere people can bring clothes, and I can make new designs. Somewhere my brothers can help after school. Her voice shook with the fear of sounding foolish. But that dream needs money. A lot of it. And I barely have enough to buy needles. Alexander nodded slowly. Dreams begin with someone believing they are possible. Before Lana could respond, someone called her name sharply from the doorway. It was Madame Cunnell, the neighborhood gossip queen. She stood with arms crossed, lips pursed. Lana Rivers. What are these rich men doing here? Are you selling secrets? Or selling yourself? Her words sliced through the room like knives. Lana's brothers gasped. Lana's face flushed with humiliation. Damien's eyes turned dangerously cold. Alexander's hand tightened around his cane. No, Lana said firmly, though her voice trembled. They're guests. And they've shown more respect than you have. Madame Cunnell scoffed. Respect? They'll use you and throw you away. Men like this always do. Alexander stepped forward, voice calm but heavy with authority that made the entire neighborhood go silent. Madam, in my life I've met wolves who hid behind gold, and I've met saints who lived in slums. Don't confuse poverty with weakness, and don't assume wealth means corruption. Madame Cunnell's mouth fell open. She stepped back, startled by his presence. Damien's gaze lingered on Lana, admiration growing. Later that afternoon, Alexander and Damien returned to their mansion. Lana waved goodbye shyly, unaware she had entered the orbit of two men carrying danger as naturally as they carried breath. As soon as the door to the mansion closed, Alexander leaned heavily against the wall. Dad, Damien rushed to steady him. I'm fine, Alexander murmured, though his breaths were shallow. Just tired. But it was worth it. Damien guided him to a chair. You shouldn't push yourself. Alexander nodded weakly. I know. But that girl, she restored something in me. Damien didn't say it aloud, but he felt the same. Lana's sincerity had disarmed him more than any weapon could. She didn't care about wealth. She didn't measure people by power. She had no idea who they truly were, and perhaps that was why her kindness mattered. But the Knight dynasty lived in shadows. Shadows didn't stay quiet for long. 2 days later, Lana opened her door to find a large box sitting neatly on her doorstep. No name, no note, just a golden ribbon tied with precision. She swallowed, hands shaking as she untied it. Inside was a brand new sewing machine, sleek, powerful, expensive enough to feed her family for months. She clasped her hands over her mouth, tears welling. Theo and Nico jumped excitedly. Lana, now you can start your shop. But Lana's heart pounded with disbelief. Who would do this? She didn't know that Alexander had stayed up late the night before choosing it. She didn't know Damien had argued that the gift must come anonymously, so she wouldn't feel pressured. She didn't know that the Knight dynasty had just silently invested in her future. That evening, someone approached Driftwood Bay with hands in his pockets and dust on his shoes. Damien Knight. Not in suits. Not with guards. Just a simple shirt. Old sneakers. A quiet desire to understand the girl who had softened his father's heart. He found her sitting on a wooden bench, eating roasted corn. She looked up. Oh, hello. Are you safe today? He smiled slightly. Safer than yesterday. They laughed softly. It felt natural. Simple. Human. He sat beside her. Do you come here often? Every evening, she said. It's the only place that feels honest. Damien nodded. I could use honest. She glanced at him, sensing a weight he didn't speak about. Are you okay? He hesitated. My family has history. Complicated history. I'm trying to figure out who I am in the middle of it. Lana nodded gently. Everyone is. Even if they don't admit it. They ate in silence for a moment. Then Lana asked softly, what brings you here really? Damien looked at her. Not at her poverty. Not at her worn sandals. Not at the roughness of her hands. He saw her heart. I wanted to thank you, he said, for helping my father, and for reminding him that good people still exist. Lana smiled shyly. I just did what anyone should do. He shook his head. No, you did what most people won't. But while their bond grew, danger grew faster. Inside the night mansion, two men argued in hushed voices. "She's a threat," one hissed. "A distraction," the other warned. "If Damien grows soft, if Alexander regains strength, we lose everything." A plan began to form in the shadows. A plan to turn kindness into weapon. A plan to destroy the girl who had unknowingly revived a dynasty. And Lana, sitting on a quiet bench with Damien, had no idea that every choice she made from now on would be used to test her heart and threaten her future. The storm did not arrive with thunder. It came quietly, through whispers, forged papers, planted lies, and shadows that moved too smoothly to be trusted. For weeks, Lana felt the air around her shift. Damien grew distant, not cold but distracted, as though something heavy pressed against his spirit. Alexander visited less, his health wavering. And people in Driftwood Bay began whispering things Lana couldn't understand. Until the night, everything collapsed. It was late evening when Damien arrived at her door, alone, breath unsteady, eyes dark with something she had never seen in him before. Rain clung to his clothes. His jaw was tight. His voice, when he finally spoke, trembled not with rage but with heartbreak. "Lana, tell me it isn't true." She stepped back, startled. "What isn't true?" He held out a thin manila envelope. Inside, Lana glimpsed papers, bank transfers she didn't recognize, photos of her speaking to strangers outside her shop, recordings of conversations she never had. "I was told," Damien whispered, "that someone paid you to get close to us. That you're being used by our enemies. That you were sent to destroy what's left of my father." Lana's breath shattered in her chest. "Damien, no. I would never." He stepped back sharply as if her words burned him. "I need the truth. Right now." Tears blurred her vision. "I don't know what any of this is. I don't even have a bank account. You know that." Damien swallowed hard, and pain flickered across his face. He wanted to believe her. God, he wanted to. But the Knight family had been hunted, betrayed, and manipulated for decades. Trust, to him, was not a feeling, it was a battlefield. And someone had poisoned that battlefield. "I need time," he whispered. "I need to think." Lana reached for him. "Damien." He flinched away. It felt like her heart tore in two. "Don't follow me," he said quietly, and the rain swallowed his footsteps as he walked away. Lana stood frozen in the doorway, the envelope trembling in her hands, her soul unraveling. The storm finally broke inside her. She sank to her knees, sobbing into the mud, the world she had carefully stitched together falling apart again. While Lana cried alone in Driftwood Bay, the night mansion simmered with tension. Alexander sensed it immediately. He saw the shadows whispering behind doors. He saw Damien avoiding eye contact. He sensed danger tightening around them like a noose. One evening, he confronted his son. "Damien," Alexander said quietly, "what have you done?" Damien's voice was low. "I confronted her." Alexander's gaze sharpened. "Over what?" Damien hesitated. "Evidence. That she was a threat. That she was sent to manipulate us." Alexander closed his eyes, jaw tightening. "And you believed it?" Damien's throat bobbed. "I didn't want to. But our enemies." "Our enemies," Alexander said, "benefit most when we destroy ourselves." A chilling silence stretched between them. Alexander leaned forward slowly, painfully. "Son, goodness is rare. And when you find it, the world will try to convince you it's a threat." Did she, Lana, ever ask for money? Influence? Protection? Damien shook his head. Did she ever come to this house uninvited? Did she ever push you for secrets? No. Then why, Alexander demanded softly, would a girl who gave her last bread to a stranger suddenly become a mastermind spy? Damien's breath hitched. The truth slammed into him like a blow. He whispered, "Someone set her up." Alexander nodded grimly. "Someone inside this family." The next morning, Alexander gathered every associate, partner, advisor, and blood relative of the Knight dynasty for a mandatory meeting. Word spread across Raven Heights faster than wildfire. A storm was coming. A reckoning. A return of the king. Lana heard about it from neighbors who whispered as though speaking of gods. She sat in her tiny shop, hands shaking, replaying Damien's voice again and again. By noon, her heart couldn't stay still anymore. She closed the shop sign, took a trembling breath, and walked toward the hill where the mansion stood, each step a mixture of fear and hope. Inside the grand hall, tension crackled like electricity. Men in suits shifted uneasily. Advisors exchanged glances. Two of Alexander's cousins whispered in a corner, whispers that froze when Damien entered behind his father. Alexander, cane steady, eyes burning with quiet authority, stepped forward. "Someone," he began, voice echoing, "has tried to poison the one thing my family has left, trust." Heads lowered. The guilty ones swallowed hard. "Someone forged documents," Alexander continued. "Someone hired imposters. Someone manipulated my son to doubt the girl who saved my life." Damien's jaw clenched. Alexander's voice sharpened. "Bring them forward." Two guards dragged the culprits into the center, the same men who once whispered in the shadows, plotting to destabilize the Knight legacy. Gasps erupted. One cursed loudly. She was a threat to the dynasty. Alexander raised his cane, slow, deliberate. "The threat was you." Then the heavy doors burst open. Lana stood there, breathless, soaked from nervous sweat, eyes swollen from crying. Every head turned. Damien froze. Alexander's expression softened instantly. "Child, come." She stepped forward slowly, painfully aware of every stare. I needed to clear my name," she whispered. "You don't need to clear anything," Alexander said. "The truth has already spoken." He nodded to his guards. The traitors were escorted out, their protests fading into silence. Damien stepped toward her, guilt etched deep into every line of his face. "Lana, I failed you." Tears welled. "You believe them?" "Yes," he whispered. "Because I was afraid. Because I've been betrayed before. Because I don't know how to trust without doubting." Lana looked away, but he gently guided her chin back. "But losing you," Damien said, voice breaking, "taught me something I should have learned a long time ago. Love is not born from fear. It's born from sincerity. And you've given my father and me more sincerity than we deserve." The hall fell silent. Then Alexander stepped forward, lifting a small velvet box. "Lana Rivers," he said gently, "you brought humanity back into a dynasty built in shadows. And because of you, we stand stronger today than we have in years." He opened the box. Inside lay a golden needle, symbol of creation, symbol of purpose. Damien whispered, "Let me sew my life to yours forever." Gasps swept the hall. Lana covered her mouth. Tears poured silently. She nodded, and as Damien embraced her, the hall erupted in applause. Not for wealth, not for power, but for kindness, the force strong enough to rebuild a broken king and redeem a wounded heir. That evening, under soft lights outside the mansion, Alexander watched the two young souls stand hand in hand. He felt something warm settle in his chest, a peace he thought he would never feel again. Power had not saved him. Kindness had. And Lana, once mocked for her poverty, now stood as the heart that restored a dynasty. In life, appearances often deceive us. The one the world ignores may be the very hand that saves us. The one mocked for having nothing may carry the richest heart. Lana's kindness healed a broken king, and her loyalty restored a family lost in shadows. Let her journey remind us. Greatness is not measured by wealth, but by compassion. Before you judge, pause. Before you walk away, look again. The life you change might one day change yours. If this story touched you, please like the video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to Nemi's Folktales for more powerful stories.